Good morning, everybody. So you have already looked a little bit at some of the introduction to The Plague by Albert Camus, and we need to talk now about some of the main characters and about sort of what their trajectory is. I'm going to start with sort of an example of kind of what I'm hoping that you're going to be talking about with your groups this week, and that is how these main characters sort of fit our existential views, the ones that we are gaining now, the ones that we've looked at as far as the thoughts that Sartre has and that Kierkegaard has, and a couple of examples. Right, I'm not going to go through every character. Right, I would like for your groups to do that as much as possible, but if we start with somebody like Bernard Rieux, the doctor, the main character, arguably, what we can talk about is that through this first half of the book, right, especially up through the end of the first section, we see Bernard Rieux acting in such a way that I believe that as from an existentialist point of view, is he an existentialist? Let's talk about that a little bit later. But if we talk about him and his actions from the point of view of somebody who's trying to evaluate him through the lens of existentialism, I think that we have a character who is very responsible, who is definitely working for what looks like no other reason than his decision and his desire to be the best person that he can be. When we start the story, we see Rieux needing to send his wife away. She is ill. We're not sure exactly what's happened to her. We assume that perhaps it's either a nervous condition, it's the effects of perhaps a mental illness. It could be also a combination of a lot of other things. It could be a tuberculosis or another type of wasting illness, right? She seems weak. She seems unwell. She seems fragile. And he is sending her away to someplace where she can relax and get better, right? And we can look at this from 2 points of view. We can look at this as she would be in the way and he needs to get rid of her because he can't deal with her, right, at the time. But I think we see that he is moved, he is sad about sending her away. When he sends her away, he must sort of do this almost against his better, not his better judgment, but against his desire, right? And so I think that we can see Rieux as somebody who is willing to sacrifice for the greater good. That is image number one, right? That would be example number one of why I think that we can look at him as somebody who, is willing to, sacrifice and do things that are responsible, right? He realizes that keeping her, even before the plague starts, right? Even before there is this question of plague, that keeping her in town would not be good for her health, that he is no longer capable of doing the best thing for her in town, that there are people who can better care for her. And so he sends her away. I think as well, when the plague starts, he is not interested in his own name being out there and being sort of at the forefront of at the head of government, or he simply understands that what is needed is clarity, right? People need to know what's going on, that his decisions do seem to be informed by the fact that what is going to be best for everybody is not necessarily going to be fun, but that he is interested in the responsibility that he has as a doctor to make sure that people are cared for. So I think when we look at Rieux, I think what we can see in his interactions throughout this first half of the book, his willingness to sacrifice, his willingness to be on the front lines, his willingness to work with anybody who's willing to help, right, to improve the situation is important, right? He is willing to put his own personal feelings aside if it means making sure that others are well, right? That he is willing to undergo whatever other people undergo in order to make sure that the greater good is met. What are the characteristics of an existentialist, according to Sartre, that make them a good person, that turn them into a responsible person in general? Well, we know, right, that they must be willing to, whatever they choose, they would choose for everybody in humanity. And whatever they choose for everybody else in humanity is what they would choose for themselves, right? That sort of goes hand in hand. He is willing to stay. He is willing to quarantine the town. He is willing to be on the front lines. He is willing to undergo tests if he needs to on his own. He is prepared, right, to isolate people and to endure the psychological difficulty of having to put people into hospitals, right, where he knows that they may not come out, where the families know that they may not come out. He's not willing to bend the rules because he knows what needs to be done. So I think from the existentialist point of view, that is how we would evaluate his character, right? When we come back, I want to talk about one other person. I want to talk about Father Panelou, who is an intriguing character, right? The sort of, I don't want to say it like, in a way, sort of the token Catholic in the story, right? What does the religious side of things have to do with it? If we look at it from through the first half of the book, how do we evaluate Panelou, and how do we evaluate sort of his point of view?